Hi, this is Shambhavi. Welcome to my weekly podcast about spirituality, love, death, devotion, and waking up while living in a messy world. The Satsang with Shambhavi podcast is recorded live each week with students of our nonprofit community, Jayakula. For more information and to find out about attending a satsang, visit jayakula.org. Thanks for listening. Much love to you, wherever and however you are. Hello, this is Shambhavi. Welcome to Satsang. Satsang is an ancient spiritual practice from India. It means being in reality together. I give Satsang live every Wednesday and Sunday night in Portland, Maine. This Dharma talk was recorded during one of our Wednesday night gatherings. Please visit jayakula.org to learn more about the teachings. You can find video satsangs on Jayakula's YouTube channel, and my books are all available on Amazon.com. Much love to you, wherever and however you are. So the topic of tonight's chat is what is the purpose of spiritual practice? And so we need to understand what we're even asking about when we ask that question. The word spiritual is, I always feel a little inner wince when I use that word. Yeah, sometimes I say spiritual. I have a little inner wince because people have mostly what we call dualistic understandings of that word. Most people feel that there's something spiritual and then there's something that's not spiritual. Or they think they have a body and then something called a soul, which is very radically different from the body. And neither of those concepts of spirituality are relevant in this tradition. In this tradition, you could say everything is spiritual or nothing is spiritual, but what you really would have to say is that everything is the same thing. That everything is made of consciousness and energy. Everything is made of God. So in this tradition, Trika Shaivism, there's not any radical difference between matter and more subtle things like mind or even enlightened mind. There's whatever you want to call spirit. There's only a gradation of expressions from something that's more gross. Something like this is pretty, gross, not like ooey, but gross just like very palpable, touchable, obvious. Gross meaning very obvious. Right? So there's a continuum from this level of existence, through to our energy body and our minds, and eventually to the mind of God, unconditioned consciousness and energy. So when we say spiritual, we either mean the whole thing or we throw everything out. When we say spiritual practice or sadhana, is a bad translation of sadhana, spiritual practice, we mean that which helps us to discover what we are, that which helps us to walk from our more gross, contracted, tense state to a more expansive, relaxed state where we can experience our continuity with life. So that's the whole process of spiritual practice, is that process of remembering our continuity with life, moving from a place of feeling separate and lonely and defensive and aggressive to a place where we feel that there is only one here. And that may sound like almost an unimaginable kind of experience to have, but we've all had that experience. So we've all had experiences where our sense of separation is lessened. We may not have all had experiences of enlightenment, but we have all had experiences where we feel less separate. And as simple as we're sitting at home alone, feeling sad, and then someone unexpectedly calls and invites us to go out to dinner, better yet, invites us to their house for dinner. And all of a sudden, when we're in a completely new situation with people who have invited us and are happy to see us, and we feel a sense of gratitude and lightness of being and connection in that ordinary way. Well, that is actually part of the continuum of waking up. You can think of self-realization as just an extension of that kind of process, where we feel lonely and separate, and we get invited by our practice, by our teacher, by our tradition, to start to lessen the sense of separation that we feel and get connected in a joyous and light way with everything, not just with a few friends. But our ability to connect with a few friends, or our families, or a lover, is the same capacity that eventually will lead us to wake up and discover that we are family with everybody and everyone. It's the same thing. It just becomes more expansive and more subtle, and drops more of its limitation away, that capacity that we have to move from a state of relative separation to a state of relative or absolute connection. That's what spiritual means in this tradition, and the practice is to move us in that direction. So spiritual practice, or sadhana, means to go toward the goal. That's the literal translation of sadhana, to go toward the goal. And the goal is to know ourselves, to wake up, to be in the fullness of reality, to live with all of our senses completely functioning at the highest possible, most expansive level. So we're hearing and seeing and feeling things that are part of us that we didn't realize were part of us before. The reason why greatly realized people can see things and hear things and understand things that aren't at all apparent to us is because they're more identified with a bigger world. They don't have the experience that their bodies are ending here. They're just using their senses in a much bigger way, identified with a much bigger sphere. And this is something that is on some minor level not really very uncommon. So there's plenty of people who can see more subtle things. People who can see other people's energy bodies, or people who can intuit things about other people in a way that we would call psychic. These are all just extensions of, or openings of the sensorium, the human sensorium, in a way that anybody can do by relaxing your limited self-concept. So those are like beginning steps in waking up. They're all in the same path. They're all on the same continuum. Practice means something that we do to establish both a new pattern in our lives and a new skill. So when we're doing practice, it's very important, whether it's mantra or meditation or some other kind of a practice, Ayurveda, that to do it every day and to do it in a consistent way, even at a consistent time of day. Because then we start to develop a new habit in our lives, rather than the habits that drag us into ill health and dis-ease and complicated, entangled situations with ourselves and other people, and money and that kind of stuff. We establish patterns that move us in a healthier direction. And to do that, we have to learn about the rhythms of nature, how nature works, and how to take care of a human body, and how to orient a human body more naturally, according to the rhythms of every day and the season. So a very important part of going toward the goal, which is to wake up, is to go along with nature. a big part of any authentic spiritual practice is learning how to do that. And we do it through Ayurveda, but there's plenty of other ways. Ayurveda is just one way. The other thing that's required, if we talk about spiritual work or spiritual practice, is effort. Now, this is something that, effort and persistence. And this is something that people in our culture in these times have less of a natural understanding of. I think a lot of it has to do with the instantaneousness of a lot of our experiences on the internet, with the idea that we should be able to become experts in things. I mean, how many of you have thought, oh, I'd like to learn a language, or I'd like to learn how to play a musical instrument, or I'd like to learn something, and then you think you're going to go on the internet and you should have it down like, in a few hours or a few days. Right? And then you get frustrated because, wait a minute, or, I've had this experience where I buy some fancy drawing art program for my iPad, right? And I think I'm going to be able to draw something, but I actually haven't put in any effort or discipline to learn how to draw. So, the program's not going to do it for me. I still have to do it, right? And many, many of us have these kinds of experiences because of the culture that we live in. And then when we get to the idea of spiritual practice or spiritual work, as it's sometimes called, we don't have experience with doing something consciously and consistently day by day without knowing exactly what's going to happen. If we decide to study something in school, a regular school, then, before we plonk down our money, we read the course syllabus, and maybe we read reviews of the professor on some website, and we look at, what the outcomes of the course are going to be and what it is we're going to learn, and maybe we even think about how we're going to make money with what we learned. We've got this whole thing mapped out. We've got in our mind, what it's all about and what we're paying for. When we do spiritual practice, when we embark on a course of spiritual teachings and learning some practice and doing it, we don't have a syllabus, right? We have some feelings. We have some inkling of something. We have an experience of being in teachings. We have an experience of being with the teacher. But it's all, kind of fleeting and uncertain, and doubts creep in, and we're not really sure where it's all heading. And we have to learn what real apprenticeship is about. Real apprenticeship is you're just going day by day, focusing on the process and acquiring whatever skill you require out of sheer intuitive love for something. Because that's really the basis of what keeps us going in spiritual practice. People often start or come to a teaching or some meditation group or something like that because they're, feeling maybe their blood pressure is too high, maybe they're nervous, maybe they're angry, maybe their girlfriend left them and they want a new one, whatever reason they come. And some people come with other, something else going on that's a little more serious. But however anybody shows up, there is going to be, for people in our culture, a kind of rude awakening when you start to realize that you actually, if you want the fruit of the practice, you just have to do it day by day without exactly knowing what's going to happen. And in fact, that all the skills that you learned in your education in regular old school will not serve you. Your intelligence will serve you, that's for sure. But your discrimination will serve you. But your need to know what will happen and what the outcome will absolutely be obstacles on your path. And the real thing that keeps anybody going on a spiritual path of spiritual practice is a kind of recognition that this is actually going to be fulfilling, unlike anything else in life. That this is actually going to bring you wisdom and fulfillment, unlike everything else, which only brings you those things in small measure or temporarily. And then there just becomes this tremendous excitement about the whole process. But this isn't always from the beginning. And we have this obstacle to get over, many of us. This obstacle of not understanding what it means to apprentice yourself to a discipline. When a person is learning some craft, they're not just doing it thinking, I'm going to acquire these skills and then I'm going to go sell them over here and make a living. They're thinking, oh, I love these tools. Oh, wow, this material I'm working with is really interesting to me. I love my teacher. God, it's so amazing. I found this great teacher. And I walk into the, whatever I'm learning, the shop or whatever it is, and I love the way it smells in here and the way the light comes in the window. And I just feel so great doing this. And it's hard, and sometimes I'm frustrated and I feel I'll never get it right. But I just have to try anyway. Right? That's what an attitude of an apprentice. Not quite knowing, am I good enough? Nobody who starts out in a real discipline, like being something, like you're really being like an artist of the self, right? No one who starts out doing anything like that really knows how it's going to turn out. So there has to be this sort of love of it, for it, and this sense of what it will bring you in terms of real fulfillment. Not just a job or a badge of some sort. So there are many things that people say these days about so-called spiritual practice, why they do it. And most of those reasons are quite ordinary, which is fine. People want ordinary relaxation. They just want to feel a little calmer. You'll often hear people say, I do my meditation in the morning and it helps me feel better during the day, right? And this is very true. But there is a lot more to it than that. So in this tradition, we're really focused on ordinary relaxation, but much more than that. Relaxing your body, relaxing your mind, relaxing your energy, relaxing your self-concept and your concepts of the world and other people, so that the freshness of life can reveal itself to you. The immediacy and intelligence of life can reveal itself to you in full. So the number one thing that this practice is for is to relax. And in this non-ordinary way, this very profound way that I'm pointing toward. In a way, we're stopping. I was just reading an article where somebody was quoting their teacher as saying that the goal of spiritual practice is to have no business. To have no business in life. To have nothing you feel you must do or you must not do. To simply just stop and be in the immediacy of life. Sounds good, huh? So that's maybe one part of that relaxation. It doesn't mean do nothing. It just means stop all the things that you do to manipulate yourself, to manipulate other people, to manipulate the course of your life in this defensive and aggressive way. So when we relax, we discover about reality. We discover what is actually happening here. When we stop being aggressive toward life, aggressive with our concepts and ideas and stories about life, our fears, our worries about life, when we stop those things and relax those things, then we actually discover something about life. Life can actually speak to us because we finally shut up. And then a big aspect of this kind of practice, direct realization practice, is that we're opening our senses. The person who did a lot to sort of form this tradition back at the end of the 10th century said that our senses are deities playing in the field of duality, and that we must satisfy our senses. And what he really meant was that through the wonderful human senses that we have, God is enjoying the creation. Now, our senses, the way that we experience them right now, are really limited. So I would guess that even though some of you have heard me say this before, you still think that you're hearing with your ears and smelling with your nose and tasting with your tongue and seeing with your eyes and so forth. These little organs of the senses are actually just gross symbols of these huge capacities for seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching, for seeing what you think is far from you. It's not really far from you. From hearing wisdom, from receiving direct communications from wisdom, from being able to taste the essence of life. Our senses have much more capacity because they really are the senses of this one consciousness and energy. And when we begin to let go of the conviction that we are just this little body, we begin to identify more with the larger sense capacity of this reality. And so it really affects the way we practice, that we're trying to relax and open and expand our senses. In many traditions from India, there will be a lot of emphasis on withdrawal. So emphasis on practices where you're going inside and you're shutting down your senses. Or emphasis on focusing very, very narrowly on something. You're staring at an object, or you're staring at the tip of a candle flame. And a lot of practice is done with your eyes closed. Right? We do those things too, but we tend to put more emphasis on practices where you're making contact with your environment, opening up your senses, and with your eyes open. So this is a hallmark of all of the direct realization traditions, not just Kashmir Shaivism. That there's much more emphasis on moving out past the boundaries of your small self and making contact with a larger world, with your eyes and with the rest of your senses. And this idea that we're awakening our senses so we can participate fully in life has very practical implications for how we do sadhana. This is the point that I'm making right now. And then, because our senses are understood to be the way that basically God experiences the creation, there's no sense of denigrating our senses. There's no sense that there's anything wrong with having sensation, with enjoying the creation. Right now, our enjoyments are very limited. We're attached to very limited forms of enjoyment. But when we begin to lose some of those karmic tensions, then we can enjoy everything. We can enjoy things without so much, I like this, I don't like that, I like this person, I don't like that person. We can begin to enjoy everything as an aspect of this creation. So as we begin to wake up, there's more of a sense of playfulness, more of a sense of delight in how things are, less reactivity to what's happening with other people, more understanding that other people are showing up and expressing something that is actually marvelous, not just annoying. And this just happens slowly over time as our self-concept and our senses wake up and our understanding deepens about what's really going on here. We can begin to have that karmic reactivity, that level of it, subside, and this sense of wonder and enjoyment begin to arise. So that makes this tradition quite different from some others, where there's a feeling that there's something degraded about this world and we have to get out of it, or prove that it doesn't exist, or something like that. And then the third purpose of spiritual work, after to relax and to experience our senses in this expanded way, is to find out what is the full capacity of human being. We all showed up. Part of our karma, a big part of our karma, is that we showed up as human beings. We didn't show up as slugs or gods or anything in between. We showed up as human beings. That's part of our karmic package. And when I say karma, I mean patterns of consciousness and energy that are moving through time and have a kind of a life cycle. And we're kind of a collection of those things, in addition to having freedom. So we're here in these human bodies, and one of the hallmarks of this tradition is, first of all, an understanding that having a human body can be pretty great, because we have a lot of different things we can do. I mean, tigers are great too, but a tiger can't make wine and go surfing, or like most animals are more limited in the variety of experiences that they can have as compared to human beings. We're not as good as a lot of animals at various things. We can't scamper up a tree and swing from limb to limb like a monkey. We can't run as fast as a cheetah. We're probably not as smart as whales and dolphins. Or elephants, as far as I can tell. But we do have this sort of Jack and Jill of all trades thing going on, where we can do a whole lot of things sort of in an okay way. And that means that we can do a lot of different kinds of spiritual practice. So it's said that this realm is the best, the human realm is the best realm to be born in, be precisely not because we're better than anybody else, but actually because we're mediocre. But we have a lot more variety of capabilities. We're sort of okay at lots of different things. And so we can do mantra, we can do puja, we can meditate, we can do kriya yoga, we can do asana, we can draw things, we can sing kirtan, we can just do all these different things. And why is that important? It's not just important because variety is good. It's important because we have more options of how we can begin to wake up. Right? So given that there's such a huge variety of people, there's always something that someone can do to help them to wake up, because we have all these different variety of things that are possible for us. So that's why it's said that it's good to be born as a human being. Now, that being said, we only are experiencing right now a very small portion of what it is possible to experience in a human body. One of the things I love about reading stories of Anandamayi Ma, my guru, is she really embodied much more of the capacity of what is possible in a human body. She had extraordinary capacities, and she was in a human body. And she was married, and she grew up in a regular family, but she had all these extraordinary capabilities. Capabilities for seeing and hearing and knowing things that were very distant from her physical body, knowing past and future, being able to work with time and manipulate events, being able to work with people in wonderful ways to help them to wake up, and knowing all kinds of, being able to just pull wisdom out of the air pretty much, and have this incredible insight into how reality works. And in addition to just all the wacky things that happen with her body, and levitating and all kinds of wacky things that were always being reported about her, but I think that her access to wisdom was really what was so extraordinary. That she could know things because reality knows those things, and she was so identified with that larger reality that, you know, she could quote whole philosophy books, having never read them. She was actually only had, 3 months of schooling in her whole life. She could barely read and write. But she could quote whole passages of scripture in Sanskrit, argue with pundits and philosophers, and win. She knew the rituals of other traditions without having studied them. She knew how to do spiritual practices with no one having ever told her. And this is all because she was identified with this larger reality. Herself was that reality, that wisdom that had invented all of those practices and scriptures and books. And that's why she knew them, because they were part of her own self. So she was, and is, to me, the example in my life of what is possible even in a human body. Now, I don't expect me or anybody else that I know to ever attain the state that she was in, but it's marvelous to be able to travel that path a little bit in a particular lifetime and to see what can happen. So the third purpose of spiritual practice is to explore being human, to find out what's possible for you as a human being in this lifetime. How much can you embody of this reality in this human flavor, in this human way, in some particular lifetime? And that's a great adventure. Right? We each come in here completely uniquely configured, with different karmas, different capacities, different life experiences. And we're all, even if we receive the same teachings, and we're all in human bodies, we're all going to have a different trajectory in our lives. And it's just very exciting to explore, what can you do? How much can you embody? What will you discover? It's just absolutely the greatest adventure that you can possibly be on. Now, this probably sounds really different in tone to people who haven't been around this tradition for very long, where the idea of glorifying being human sounds kind of foreign, right? Humans are abject, we're suffering, of course we're suffering. But in this tradition, the only reason we're suffering is because we're ignorant of our own nature, not because we're bad. And once we find out more about our own nature, then we stop suffering so much. Now we can just enjoy this manifestation, what is showing up. This view of the relationship of what's called moksha, or liberation, to enjoyment. Actually, what they say is bhukti and mukti. So bhukti is one way of saying enjoyment, and mukti is one way of saying liberation. And what it says in the ancient Tantric scriptures is that there's no contradiction between bhukti and mukti. There's no contradiction between waking up and enjoying. In fact, they're the same. When you wake up, you discover the enjoyment of God for the creation. And this is true in all of the direct realization traditions. This view is held in common by Kashmir Shaivism, Dzogchen, Chan Buddhism, and other traditions like this. So it's not uncommon, but it's not as commonly known. It's not as commonly known a view in this country, where most people's contact with some Indian spirituality is a yoga studio, or you have contact with Buddhism, where there's a lot at the sort of beginning and middle levels, much more emphasis on suffering. Jayakula is a nonprofit community offering opportunities to learn and practice in the direct realization traditions of Trika Shaivism and Dzogchen. We are based in Portland, Maine and Portland, Oregon. Visit jayakula.org to explore more of our offerings.